Hi everyone, my name is Holly Dixon, and I am 32 years old. Let me paint a picture for you. It was the evening of my birthday, and I was stepping through the front door of my parents' house, genuinely believing I was walking into a sweet surprise party. Instead, what I walked into was a nightmare. I found 200 of my relatives seated in perfectly straight rows, staring at me like a jury in a courtroom. They were waiting to pass judgment. As I stood there frozen, my mother walked over to the family photo wall and began violently tearing my childhood pictures down, one by one. Then, my father stood up, cleared his throat, and read aloud a literal invoice for $400,000. He claimed that was the exact amount of money they had wasted raising me, down to the very last cent. To top it all off, my sister walked up, ripped my car keys straight out of my hands, and gave me a smug smile, announcing that our dad had already transferred the title of my car into her name. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked out that front door without uttering a single syllable. Fast forward 4 days, and my phone was blowing up. They were calling me 80 times a day, begging me to answer. But I ignored every single one of them. And today, I'm going to tell you exactly why. Before we dive into all the crazy details of what happened, do me a huge favor. Take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, but only if you actually enjoy a good story of karma. Also, drop a comment below letting me know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Alright, let's rewind to where this whole mess truly began. Growing up as a member of the Dixon family, there was a rule you learned very quickly. There was Megan, and then there was everyone else. My dad, Richard Dixon, was a man who built his real estate empire from absolute scratch. To him, human value was exclusively measured in square footage and annual profit margins. My mom, Patricia, used to be a humble school teacher before she married him. But once she got that ring, she eagerly traded in her chalk and lesson plans for high society dinner parties and aggressive social climbing. And then there was my younger sister, Megan. She was 4 years younger than me, undeniably gorgeous, and treated like the absolute, unquestionable princess of our home. I'll never forget the day I found out I got a full-ride scholarship to a prestigious pre-med program. I was 16 years old, standing on the auditorium stage, desperately scanning the sea of parents to find mine. They were nowhere to be found. Why? Because Megan had a ballet recital that exact same afternoon. It was just more important, Holly, my mother told me later, not even bothering to glance up from the screen of her smartphone. When I finally graduated from nursing school at 22, at the very top of my class, mind you, my mother just let out a heavy sigh. She told me that if only I had been smart enough to study business like Megan, my dad would finally have a worthy successor for his company. It apparently didn't matter at all that Megan ended up dropping out of that same business program barely 2 years later. It didn't matter that I was literally working in the ICU saving human lives, while Megan was busy maxing out multiple credit cards on designer clothes. In my parents' eyes, the sun rose and set with Megan, and I was just the disappointment in the background. My beautiful youngest daughter, my mom would constantly coo at the dinner table, gently brushing Megan's hair. Then she'd look at me and say, "Holly, why can't you be a little more like your sister?" So I learned. I adapted. I learned that in the Dixon household, love was a transactional currency with conditions I was never going to be able to meet. I learned how to make myself as small as possible, to bite my tongue, and to endlessly keep the peace. But there was exactly one person in the world who saw me for who I actually was. One person who offered me unconditional love, and she was the one who was about to alter the course of my entire life. My grandma Eleanor was the only relative who ever made me feel like I had a place in this world. When I confessed to her that I wanted to become a nurse instead of a corporate drone in my dad's real estate firm, she just reached out and held my hands. Her hands were always so warm and steady. "Taking care of people is the most noble work there is, sweetheart," she told me gently. "Don't you ever let anyone convince you otherwise." Tragically, 3 years ago, Grandma Eleanor was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The specialists gave her 18 months to live, maybe 2 full years if a miracle happened. Immediately, my parents started discussing hiring a random full-time caregiver. Megan rolled her eyes and suggested just tossing her into a nursing home. It would just be so much easier, she casually mentioned while filing her manicured nails. I didn't even hesitate. I submitted my resignation at the hospital that exact same week, packed up my life, and moved into Grandma's cozy little house on the outskirts of town. For the next 3 years, my entire world revolved around measuring out her pain medications, holding her hand through agonizingly bad nights, and reading books aloud to her when the pain was too severe to let her sleep. In those entire 3 years, Megan showed up to visit exactly twice. My parents would drop by maybe once a month, stay for exactly 30 minutes, and bolt out the door armed with some pathetic excuse about rush hour traffic or exclusive dinner reservations. But Grandma and we shared something incredibly beautiful and real. She would pass the time by telling me rich stories about my late grandfather and the wild dreams she had when she was a young woman. Most importantly, she taught me that true strength isn't always about yelling and fighting back. Sometimes, it's about intimately knowing your own worth, even when the people surrounding you are totally blind to it. 6 months ago, she passed away. It happened very quietly, in her sleep, while my hand was securely wrapped around hers. At the funeral service, my mother yanked me aside by the elbow. "Don't stand around acting like you made some grand sacrifice," she hissed at me. "It's not like she left you a dime anyway." I didn't say a word back to her. At the time, I had absolutely no idea how spectacularly wrong my mother was. Because Grandma Eleanor had been secretly preparing something. Something my greedy family was already circling like a pack of starved vultures. The very first massive red flag popped up exactly 1 week before my 32nd birthday. I was just finishing up a grueling double shift at the hospital when my phone vibrated in my pocket. The caller ID said Megan. I stared at it in disbelief because Megan literally never called me. Ever. "Holly?" Her voice sounded totally off. It was overly sweet. Sugary. Fake. "Hey, have you gotten any weird mail from a lawyer recently? Something to do with Grandma's estate." I leaned against the wall of the hospital break room, my brow furrowing. "No." "Why do you ask?" There was a heavy pause on the other end. "Oh, no reason. Just curious." "Listen, I've actually been chatting with Mom and Dad. We really want to throw you a massive surprise birthday party at the house. The whole extended family is going to be there." I swear I almost dropped my scorching hot coffee all over my scrubs. In my 32 years on this earth, my family had never once thrown me a birthday party. Not a single time. "A party? For me? We just really want to make things right, Holly," she continued, laying it on thick. "Ever since everything went down with Grandma, we feel like we've been super distant. It's time we fix this family." I'm ashamed to admit it, but a tiny little spark of hope fluttered in my chest. The foolish, desperate kind of hope that every neglected child secretly harbors. About 10 minutes later, my absolute best friend and coworker, Danny, found me staring blankly at my phone screen. Danny has been my rock since our first day of nursing school. He's the protective older brother I never got to have. When I relayed the bizarre phone call to him, his face completely dropped. "Holly," he sighed, putting down his medical clipboard. "They have literally never thrown a party for you in your entire life. Why would they magically start now?" "I don't know. Maybe the guilt over abandoning Grandma is finally eating at them?" I reasoned. Danny shook his head. "People don't just change their entire personalities overnight, Holly. They just figure out better ways to disguise their true intentions." I waved away his concerns, telling him he was just being wildly paranoid. But later that night, as I laid in the dark staring at my ceiling, Danny's warning kept echoing in my skull. Megan's incredibly weird tone. The incredibly specific question about a lawyer. Why on earth would she care if I got legal mail? I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, my parents finally wanted to love me. I was completely oblivious to the trap they were meticulously laying out for me. 3 days before this supposed party, I was picking up some groceries when I bumped into my Aunt Ruth. Ruth is my mother's younger sister and the undisputed black sheep of the family. According to my snobby parents, Ruth lacks a filter and forgets her place. Translated into reality, that just meant Aunt Ruth spoke the honest truth, and my mother utterly despised her for it. "Holly." Ruth gasped, physically grabbing my forearm in the middle of the produce section. She was looking over her shoulder like we were undercover spies. "Do you know what's going on with Megan?" My stomach instantly tied itself into a knot. "No, what about Megan?" Ruth dragged me behind a massive bin of watermelons and lowered her voice to a frantic whisper. "She is in incredibly deep trouble, Holly. Bad trouble. She and Kyle took every penny they had and dumped it into some shady cryptocurrency scheme that Kyle's buddy swore was a sure thing. They lost almost $200,000. They are completely drowning. They owe banks, they owe friends, they owe everybody." I felt the grocery store floor seemingly tilt under my feet. "Wait, does Dad know about this?" "Yes, and he is losing his mind," Ruth confirmed. "He's been scrambling, trying to pull cash from absolutely anywhere to bail her out." Ruth squeezed my arm even tighter. "Listen to me, Holly. I probably shouldn't be spilling this, but you have the right to know. Your family is not throwing you a birthday party. They are staging something else entirely." The harsh fluorescent lights of the store suddenly felt blinding. "What do you mean, something else?" Ruth looked at me with a mix of deep pity and genuine fear. "I don't have all the details, but the three of them have been having secret meetings. They keep whispering about Grandma's estate, about her house." She quickly let go of my arm. "Just please be on your guard, Holly." And just like that, she scurried away, vanishing down the cereal aisle before I could interrogate her further. I stood completely alone next to the watermelons, my heart hammering against my ribs. What did Megan's massive financial screw-up have to do with me? That exact night, I finally decided to check my physical mailbox. When you work relentless night shifts in an ICU, checking physical mail falls incredibly low on your priority list. My bills were all on autopay, and anything that actually mattered was sent via email. But Ruth's warning was screaming in my mind. A lawyer. Grandma's estate. Her house. Deep at the bottom of the metal box, buried under a pile of junk mail and local grocery flyers, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. In the top corner, it proudly displayed the words, "Law Offices of Gerald Whitmore." I sat on my front steps in the pitch black, using my phone's flashlight to read the letter. "Dear Miss Dixon, we respectfully request your presence at our offices to discuss matters pertaining to the estate of Eleanor Mitchell. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to schedule an appointment. Grandma's house." The little sanctuary where I had dedicated 3 years of my life. I had just naturally assumed the property would automatically go to my mother, or maybe get split evenly among the relatives. Isn't that how inheritance normally works? But this incredibly formal letter was addressed exclusively to me. My fingers were visibly shaking as I dialed the phone number listed at the bottom. The receptionist picked up, and after putting me on a brief hold, she cheerfully offered me an appointment slot for the morning immediately following my birthday. I hung up the phone and just sat there in the quiet of my living room, flipping the heavy envelope over and over. Megan had specifically asked about a lawyer. Dad was desperately hunting for cash. They were hosting a fake party. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces were scattered right in front of me, even if I couldn't entirely see the final picture yet. But I made a firm decision right then and there. I was going to that party. Whatever sick game they were playing, I needed to witness it with my own 2 eyes. But this time, I wasn't walking in blind. For 2 entire weeks, that lawyer's letter sat quietly on my kitchen counter. If I had known what the will actually said, it would have saved me so much grief. The night before the party, insomnia hit me hard. I laid in bed, staring up at the ceiling, mentally replaying every single time I had choked down my own feelings just to keep my family happy. I thought about the time I was 20, when my dad proudly bought Megan a brand new luxury BMW for her sweet 16, while I had literally spent 3 years working minimum wage just to afford a beat-up used Honda. I thought about my 20th, 26th, and 27th birthdays, which my mother forgot entirely. Megan always got lavish weekend spa retreats. I was lucky if I got an automated Facebook message. I remembered Thanksgiving 2 years prior, when Megan loudly announced to the entire dining room that I was just a nurse, because I lacked the brain power to become a real doctor. The whole table had erupted in laughter. And what did I do? I sat there, smiled, and said absolutely nothing. Every single time I held my tongue, I fed myself the same lie. I was being the mature one, taking the high road, preserving the precious family bond. But lying there in the silence of my bedroom, the ugly truth finally washed over me. Every time I stayed silent to keep their peace, I chipped away a piece of my own soul. If I kept letting them walk all over me, eventually, there would be nothing of Holly left. I would just fade into the wallpaper of my own miserable existence. I decided right then, no more. Whatever ambush they had waiting for me, I absolutely refused to shrink. I got out of bed, pulled Grandma Eleanor's final handwritten note out of my nightstand, and read her parting words, "Live like you deserve to, sweetheart." I fell asleep with that piece of paper pressed flat against my chest. The next evening, I pulled up to my childhood home. I was wearing a simple navy blue dress, Grandma Eleanor's absolute favorite color. The sheer volume of cars was staggering. Vehicles were parked up and down both sides of the street, some even illegally parked on the neighbor's grass. This was way too many people for a casual birthday dinner. It was my first visual confirmation that this was a trap. I pulled out my phone and quickly texted Danny, "I'm here. Something feels incredibly wrong." His response popped up instantly, "I'm parked exactly 2 blocks away. Keep your phone on you." God bless Danny. He was always fully prepared for a disaster. I walked up to the front door and pushed it open. It was unlocked. The second I stepped into the living room, my blood ran cold. The entire ground floor had been completely rearranged. They had rented massive rows of metal folding chairs, easily 200 of them, and arranged them perfectly to face a long wooden table at the back of the room. It looked exactly like a courtroom trial, and every single metal chair was filled. I saw aunts, uncles, and bizarre second cousins I hadn't spoken to since middle school. I saw my dad's wealthy real estate investors. I even saw random people from the neighborhood who must have been invited purely to fill out the crowd. There were absolutely no balloons, no birthday cake, no streamers. Just 200 silent people, swiveling their heads to stare dead at me. Megan suddenly materialized right next to me. Her smile was completely unhinged, way too wide, way too manic. "You finally made it," she whispered. "Everyone has been waiting." "Waiting for what exactly?" I asked, praying my voice sounded less shaky than my knees felt. "Oh, you'll see," she chirped. She grabbed my arm tightly, her acrylic nails digging painfully into my skin, and began marching me down the center aisle. "Where's the cake, Megan?" I pushed. "Later," she hissed. "Megan, what the hell is this?" I demanded. She ignored me, dragging me closer to the front. As we walked past the rows, the crowd literally parted. Not a single person whispered, "Happy birthday." Nobody even offered a polite smile. And then, I was left standing completely alone in front of that massive wooden table, facing a firing squad of 200 relatives. My father stood up from his chair in the front row. He reached down and picked up a wireless microphone, the big, bulky kind you see at wedding receptions. "Thank you all for being here tonight." His voice boomed through the silent room, echoing off the walls. "Tonight, our family has gathered to address a highly important, highly sensitive matter." I frantically scanned the sea of faces until I spotted Aunt Ruth cowering in the very back corner, looking absolutely sick to her stomach. "For 32 years, my father boomed, slowly turning his body to face me directly, your mother and I lovingly raised you. We fed you. We put clothes on your back. We funded your education. We provided you with absolutely everything. Dad," I croaked, my throat feeling like sandpaper. "What is going on?" "Be quiet. I am not finished speaking," he snapped into the mic. You could hear a pin drop in that room. 200 people were practically holding their breath. My father calmly reached into his tailored suit jacket and withdrew a massive, stapled stack of papers. He held it up in the air, brandishing it like a murder weapon at a trial. "What I am holding is a comprehensive, meticulously detailed accounting of every single dollar we have spent on you from the moment you were born until the day you finally moved out," he announced. "Food costs, hospital bills, school supplies, birthday presents. Every single penny." He theatrically flipped to the very last page, dragging his index finger down to the bottom line. "The grand total comes out to exactly $400,000. A collective gasp rippled through the folding chairs. People were whispering in shock. For $100,000, my dad repeated, locking his cold eyes onto mine. Money that we completely wasted on a daughter who turned her back on her own flesh and blood. I never turned my back on anybody, I shot back. You have two options tonight, Holly, he said, slamming the thick stack of papers down onto the wooden table with a loud thud. You can either pay us back every single cent of this debt, or you can sign away your claim to your grandmother's house right now. The blood drained from my face. My claim to what? Oh, stop playing dumb, he sneered. We know the lawyer sent you a letter. I haven't even gone to read it yet. I argued. It doesn't matter, he said, aggressively sliding a legal document across the table toward me. Sign this paper. Relinquish the house back to the family, and we will generously forgive this entire bill. Before I could even process the absolute insanity of what he was demanding, my mother dramatically stood up from her chair. She slowly marched over to the sacred family photo wall. I had spent my whole childhood staring at that wall. It was a museum of our family's history in expensive gold frames. My mother reached up and grabbed the very first photo in the timeline. It was a picture of me at 5 years old, missing 2 front teeth and beaming at the camera. 32 years, my mother cried, her voice quivering with perfectly acted, theatrical grief. 32 years of sacrificing for a deeply ungrateful child. And then, she ripped the photograph entirely in half. The ripping sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. I was utterly paralyzed. I couldn't move a muscle. She grabbed the second frame. It was my high school graduation photo. A daughter who only ever thinks about herself, she sobbed. Ryep. She moved to my nursing school diploma picture. A daughter who never once appreciated a single thing we handed her. Ryep. And then, she reached for the one picture that made my heart physically ache. It was a candid shot of me and Grandma Eleanor, taken just days before she passed away. We were both smiling so hard, her fragile hand clutching mine. A daughter who maliciously manipulated a dying, vulnerable old woman, my mother hissed. Ryep. The torn, jagged pieces of my life fluttered to the hardwood floor like garbage. 200 people sat in their chairs and just watched. Nobody stood up. Nobody yelled stop. Right on cue, Megan lunged forward and started digging through my purse. She triumphantly yanked out my car keys and dangled them right in front of my nose. Oh, and by the way, I'll be taking these, she smirked. Dad already took the liberty of transferring the title into my name. Let's be honest, I need it way more than you do anyway. I stood there, surrounded by the literal shredded pieces of my existence. I looked at my mother's fake tears. I looked at my father's greedy hands resting on a fake invoice. I looked at my sister, clutching the keys to the car I paid for. I looked at 200 family members who had eagerly bought front row tickets to watch my execution. I easily could have broken down sobbing. I could have dropped to my knees and begged for mercy. Instead, I took a deep breath. And then another. Grandma's voice whispered clearly in my mind, "You are enough, Holly. You always were." I looked my dad dead in the eyes. And for the first time, I truly saw him. I saw past the booming voice and the expensive suit. I saw the pathetic, desperate panic hiding behind his anger. I noticed the tiny, microscopic tremor in his hands as they rested on the papers. "Dad?" I asked. My voice was chillingly calm. It honestly scared me how calm I sounded. "Have you actually taken the time to read Grandma's legal will?" He blinked, visibly caught off guard. "What?" "Her will. The actual, legally binding document. Have you personally read it?" "I don't need to read it," he snapped defensively. The house was obviously supposed to go to the immediate family. That's how it works. Are you absolutely sure about that? I tilted my head. I saw a flash of raw fear across his face. Because you're standing in front of 200 people, demanding I sign away legal rights that you haven't even bothered to independently verify. I kept my tone totally flat and professional, using the exact same voice I used when explaining a terminal diagnosis to a patient. "That is not how the law works, Dad." From the absolute back of the crowded room, I saw Aunt Ruth give me a subtle, proud nod. I whipped my head around to face Megan. "And how much money do you currently owe, Megan?" "Exactly." All the color violently drained from her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" The cryptocurrency scam. Kyle's little sure thing. How deep in the hole are you? I don't know what you mean, she stuttered, stepping backward. I am pretty sure you do, I countered loudly. Suddenly, whispers exploded across the room. Relatives were leaning into each other, exchanging incredibly confused looks. The narrative my parents had sold them was actively crumbling. My mother lunged forward. This is not about Megan's finances. This is about your disgusting selfishness. No, I said, raising my hand to silence her. This is about the three of you attempting to steal an asset that might not even belong to you, without even doing the bare minimum research to check. Dead silence fell over the room once again. I looked down at the shredded photographs, dusting my mother's shoes. I looked at the car keys gripped in my sister's sweaty palm. I looked at the absurd $400,000 bill. I am not signing a single piece of paper tonight, I announced. I certainly will not make massive legal decisions while being publicly ambushed and held hostage in front of an audience. And I absolutely will not stand here and allow you to erase me. My mother's face twisted into pure rage. How dare you speak to us? You literally just tore my face off your wall, I interrupted her, my voice echoing. Dad just tried to charge me $400,000 for the sheer crime of existing. Megan just stole my vehicle. I have absolutely nothing left to lose in this room. With that, I turned on my heel and began walking down the center aisle toward the front door. Not a single person tried to stop me. Nobody grabbed my arm. Nobody whispered an apology. Out of 200 people, I was met with complete and utter silence. Sure enough, Danny's reliable little car was idling at the stop sign at the end of the block. I yanked the passenger door open and collapsed into the seat, staring blankly out the windshield. Are you okay? Danny asked, his voice incredibly soft. No, I replied, a single tear finally escaping. But I am going to be. Danny hit the gas, and we drove away. I watched my parents' massive house shrink in the side mirror until it completely vanished into the dark. I didn't fully comprehend it right then, but walking out of that house was the greatest decision of my entire life. It just took my family 4 full days to realize the catastrophic mistake they had made. Before we get to the fallout in those 4 days, let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where everyone around you expected you to just endure horrific treatment, and you finally snapped and walked away? Drop your story in the comments below. I would genuinely love to read them. And if you're invested in this story, make sure to hit subscribe. Now, let's get to the juicy part. Danny drove me back to my apartment and crashed on my sofa that night to make sure I was safe. Neither of us slept a wink. By the time the sun came up, my cell phone was practically melting from the notifications. I had 47 missed calls from my dad, 33 from my mom, and 21 frantic text messages from Megan. Every single text was more unhinged than the last. Call me back immediately. It is an absolute emergency. The extended relatives were honestly even worse. The texts flooded in. How could you publicly humiliate your poor parents? Your grandmother is rolling in her grave. You are so unbelievably selfish. I completely powered off my phone and slammed it face down on the kitchen island. Danny brewed a pot of coffee, pitch black, just the way we drank it during ICU shifts. He didn't pester me with questions. He just sat beside me in the heavy quiet. They're only reacting to the fake story your parents fed them, Danny finally muttered. And the sad part is, they don't even want to hear your side. Later that afternoon, I went into my closet and pulled out Grandma Eleanor's old wooden memory box. She had given it to me during her final weeks, and it was stuffed with vintage photos, old trinkets, and love letters. But buried at the very bottom, I found a sealed envelope I hadn't noticed before. My name was scrawled across the front in her fragile, shaky handwriting. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was her final message to me. My dearest Holly, it began. By the time you are reading this, you have probably discovered that things are not going the way your parents originally expected. Do not panic, sweetheart. I have meticulously taken care of everything. They are going to try to take away what I have left you. Do not let them do it. Mr. Whitmore knows absolutely everything. Trust him. I read those lines 3 times over to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. She knew. Grandma Eleanor had somehow predicted this exact scenario. She knew the depths of their greed, and she had built a fortress to protect me. I looked up at Danny, the parchment physically shaking in my grip. Danny, I really need to go see this lawyer. The very next morning, I stepped into the law offices of Gerald Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore was an older gentleman with silver hair and the incredibly exhausted aura of a man who had refereed 1,000 bitter family disputes. His office smelled strongly of lemon polish and old library books. Miss Dixon, he smiled warmly, standing up to shake my hand. I have been eagerly awaiting your arrival. Do you know what just happened to me? I asked nervously. Your grandmother predicted it down to the exact dialogue. He chuckled sadly, gesturing for me to take a seat in a plush leather chair. He opened a thick manila folder and pulled out a heavy, watermarked document stamped with notary seals. The official last will and testament. Your grandmother left her entire property exclusively to you, Holly, Whitmore stated clearly. Not to a family trust. Not to be chopped up into percentages. To you and you alone. My brain short-circuited. Just to me? But why? Because you were the only human being who actually showed up for her. His tone softened significantly. 3 entire years, Miss Dixon. You sacrificed your career, your personal life, and your sanity to act as her full-time caregiver. Not a single other relative could even be bothered to visit. I stared blankly at Grandma's looping signature at the bottom of the page. The real estate is currently valued at roughly $650,000, Whitmore continued, tapping his pen. It belongs to you, completely free and clear of any debt. Nobody can touch it. But my dad practically swore on a Bible that it belonged to the family, I stammered. Your father assumed, Whitmore corrected me, leaning back in his chair. He never bothered to request a reading of the will. He just arrogantly assumed Eleanor would divide her assets equally, as is standard practice. She vehemently refused to do that. She knew exactly who deserved her legacy. Whitmore paused, tapping his chin. There is, however, one very specific legal condition your grandmother insisted on adding. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of condition? A coercion clause. If any member of your family attempts to aggressively coerce, blackmail, or threaten you into surrendering your rightful inheritance, they instantly forfeit any secondary claims they might have had to her remaining liquid assets. A tiny, satisfied smirk played on his lips. Your grandmother was an incredibly brilliant woman. But the surprises weren't over. Just then, the heavy oak door to the office clicked open. I whipped around to see my Aunt Ruth standing in the doorway. She looked incredibly sad, but also overwhelmingly relieved. Hello, sweetheart, Ruth smiled gently. Aunt Ruth. I gripped the arms of my chair. What in the world are you doing here? She walked over and took the empty seat right next to mine. Your grandmother specifically instructed me to be in this room when the truth finally came out. Whitmore nodded in agreement. Mrs. Mitchell generously served as our legal witness when Eleanor drafted this document. She has been fully aware of every single decision from day one. I looked back and forth between the two of them, my reality entirely shifting. You knew this whole time? And you didn't warn me? Ruth reached across the armrests and grasped my hand tightly. Eleanor called me 3 years ago, the exact week you moved into her spare bedroom. She told me, Patricia is never going to accept this when I'm gone. Holly is going to need a soldier in her corner. Tears immediately sprang to my eyes. But why didn't you just tell me? Because Eleanor made me swear a blood oath to keep my mouth shut, Ruth explained softly. She wanted you to genuinely know that her love for you was pure and unconditional. She didn't want you spending 3 years thinking you were working for a paycheck or a house. She wanted you to know that you were the only person who loved her simply for being her. The rest of your family, Whitmore interjected, was legally informed that a will existed, but the specific contents were kept highly classified. They made their assumptions. And their assumptions were dead wrong. My mind flashed back to my mother viciously ripping my graduation picture in half. My father arrogantly demanding $400,000 for raising me. Megan's psychotic grin as she stole my car. All of that venom, all of that public humiliation, was based on a massive, delusional lie they had mutually agreed to believe. Her absolute final wish, Ruth whispered, her voice cracking with emotion, was for you to finally realize that you are enough, Holly. You never, ever needed anyone's permission to matter in this world. I completely broke down crying right there in the law office. But they weren't sad tears. For the first time in 32 years, I was crying tears of pure, unadulterated relief. By the time the second day rolled around, the barrage of phone calls had shifted from angry to violently desperate. I briefly turned my phone on just to check the damage. 62 missed calls from Richard, 48 from Patricia, and one agonizingly long voicemail from Megan. When I listened to it, her voice was shaking with absolute sheer panic. "Holly, please pick up the phone. The lawyer's office finally called Dad back. There has been a massive mistake with the paperwork. You need to call me immediately." I sat at my kitchen island with Danny, playing the audio out loud while we drank lukewarm coffee. "A mistake?" Danny snorted loudly. "Oh, so that's the spin they're putting on it now." The text messages were even more pathetic. "Dad, Holly, we really need to talk. There has been a giant misunderstanding. Mom, sweetheart, please call us. This is not how we wanted things to go. Megan, the lawyer is claiming you're the sole beneficiary. Obviously, that is a typo. Call me right now." I flipped the phone around to show Danny. It's hilariously predictable how fast they use the word misunderstanding the second their master plan blows up in their faces. Danny's eyes narrowed. They seemed completely capable of understanding things 2 nights ago when they had an audience of 200 people. Just then, my screen lit up with another text from my dad. "We are family, Holly. Please don't let some stupid legal document come between our blood bond." I read the text twice, and then I just burst out laughing. It was a hollow, broken laugh. "A legal document didn't ruin this family, Dad," I whispered to the glass screen. "You ruined it when you handed me an itemized bill for my childhood in front of an entire crowd." Danny gently pried the phone out of my hands. "You don't owe them a single word, Holly." And he was right. The petty part of me wanted to fire back a massive paragraph screaming out all the agonizing truths I had choked down for 3 decades. But I chose to hit the power button instead. Sometimes, the most devastating weapon you can wield in a war is total, deafening silence. But obviously, my silence wasn't going to stop them. On the 3rd day, the war arrived at my front door. I was home alone. Danny had finally gone upstairs to his own apartment to shower. Suddenly, there were 3 loud, aggressive knocks at my front door. I crept over to the peephole and looked out. It was all 3 of them, my dad, my mom, and Megan, standing in the drab hallway of my apartment building like an awkward diplomatic envoy. I slowly undid the deadbolt and cracked the door open, but I firmly planted my body in the frame. I was not letting them inside. "Holly." My father's booming voice was completely gone. He sounded meek, pleading. "Please, let us come in. We need to talk." "So talk," I said coldly, crossing my arms. My mother instantly started aggressively wringing her hands together. "Sweetheart, look, the other night, things just got a little out of hand." I was so emotional, I got carried away. "You ripped my childhood photos to shreds, Mom." I cut her off instantly. "You did it in front of 200 people. I didn't mean it. You looked me dead in the eyes and called me a manipulative, ungrateful brat while you destroyed a photo of my dead grandmother," I said, my voice rising. "Was that just an accident, too?" She went completely silent. Megan forcefully shoved her way to the front. "Holly, shut up and listen to me. I am in massive trouble. If I can't secure this money by the end of the month, I am going to lose literally everything. The house, the cars, everything." "You made your own catastrophic financial choices, Megan," I said, not breaking eye contact. "Kyle gambled your life savings away on a crypto scam. That is entirely a you problem." My dad visibly stiffened, trying to reclaim his alpha male authority. "Holly, that house belongs to the Dixon family. That is exactly what your grandmother would have desired, and you know it." "Grandma specifically wanted me to have it, Dad," I replied without missing a beat. "That is precisely why she had my legal name printed on the document, and not yours." My mother's fake apologetic face instantly morphed back into a vicious snarl. "You are so unbelievably heartless. After every single thing we sacrificed to provide for you, you publicly disown us at your own birthday party." I actually laughed. You handed me a bill for $400,000 for the crime of being born. You stood there cheering while your golden child literally stole my car. And now you have the audacity to show up at my apartment and demand we play happy family? We are your family, my father shouted. Not anymore, I whispered. Right at that exact second, my dad's cell phone started ringing loudly in his pocket. He yanked it out, ready to hit ignore, but when he saw the caller ID, sheer panic washed over his face. He had to answer it. Barbara, listen, right now is really not a good. He didn't even get to finish the sentence. Barbara's voice was so incredibly loud and furious that I could hear her perfectly through the phone's earpiece. Barbara was a prominent extended relative and a key member of several high society boards in town. Richard, she screamed. I literally just got off a conference call with Gerald Whitmore. My father's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth would shatter. Barbara. He just informed me that Holly is the absolute sole beneficiary. That Eleanor left her the entire estate. Is that true, Richard? It's a complicated legal matter. And he also casually mentioned a coercion clause. Barbara cut him off, her voice dripping with absolute disgust. He said if anyone in the family tries to forcefully strip Holly of her inheritance, they are legally barred from claiming a single dime of the remaining assets. My mother's face turned the color of wet cement. Richard. She whimpered. Tell me right now, Richard, Barbara roared through the speaker, that you did not just invite 200 people to watch you publicly disown and humiliate your own flesh and blood over a property that you never had a legal claim to in the first place. Barbara, you're not getting the full context. I was sitting in the third row. Barbara screamed back. I watched Patricia tear those photographs like a psychotic woman. I watched you hold a fake invoice over your daughter's head. Do you have any idea what you've done? 200 people witnessed you trying to extort your own child, and now every single one of them knows you didn't even own the damn house. My father's hand was shaking violently. Nobody is on your side, Richard. Barbara's voice turned absolutely ice cold. You are completely finished. And with a sharp click, she hung up. The four of us stood in the suffocating silence of the apartment hallway. My mother looked like she was going to vomit. Megan looked like a terrified child. My father just stared blankly at his blackened phone screen, as if the device had physically stabbed him in the chest. For a split second, I almost felt a pang of pity for them. Almost. I think I said quietly, gesturing down the hall, you all need to leave. Now, let's take a quick pause here. If you were standing in my shoes at your front door, watching the people who abused you suddenly realize their entire lives were collapsing, what would you have done? Would you have shown them mercy and forgiven them? Or would you have slammed the door and walked away forever? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments. And if you're dying to hear how this revenge concludes, keep watching. But don't forget to hit that subscribe button first. Let's get back to the final showdown. My father slowly slid his phone back into his pocket. When he finally looked back up at me, the arrogant rage was entirely gone. All that was left was raw, pathetic desperation. Holly, he pleaded, his voice cracking. I am so sorry. I made a massive mistake. Can we please just step inside and handle this like rational adults? I leaned against the doorframe, studying his defeated posture. Are you actually sorry because you realize you were wrong, Dad? Or are you just sorry because the entire neighborhood now knows what a monster you are? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought, I scoffed. My mother desperately pushed past him, hot tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. Holly, I am begging you. Megan needs financial help. She is your flesh and blood. If she can't pay this massive debt, she is going to lose everything she owns. I looked at my mother and kept my voice perfectly flat. She is a grown woman, Mom. She made a massive gamble, and she lost. That is the reality of the real world. You are so evil. Megan suddenly shrieked, balling her hands into fists. I am your sister. You stole my car keys right out of my hand while her mother ripped my face in half. I yelled back, finally letting a fraction of my anger slip out. You do not get to play the "we're sisters" card when it's suddenly convenient for your bank account. My father tried one last, desperate guilt trip. That house holds the family legacy, Holly. It belongs with the family. Grandma put it in a legally binding contract because she explicitly did not want you touching it, I fired back. She hired a lawyer. She had a witness sign the paperwork. That isn't an opinion, Dad. It is an undeniable legal fact. So you're just going to take all of it? He asked, his voice turning bitter and cold once again. You're going to hoard it all for yourself? I am going to honor Grandma's final wishes to the absolute letter, I stated proudly. He stared at me for a long, heavy moment. Then his shoulders slumped, and something completely shattered inside of him. Fine, he spat out. But don't come crying back to us when you're all alone and realize what you threw away. I promise you I won't, I said, stepping backward into my apartment and gripping the edge of the door. I am not the one destroying this family, Dad. I'm just finally done letting you treat me like I don't exist. And with that, I slammed the heavy door right in their faces and locked the deadbolt. On the fourth day, I marched right back into Mr. Whitmore's office. The morning sun was pouring through his giant windows, illuminating the dust motes in the air. For the first time in my entire life, my mind felt completely clear. I've officially made my decision, I announced as I sat down in the leather chair. I am keeping the house, and I am absolutely not selling it. Whitmore smiled warmly and pulled out a fresh stack of legal transfer documents. A wise choice. What exactly are your plans for the property? Grandma always told me it was her sanctuary. A safe, quiet place. I smiled, thinking back to our long talks on the front porch. I'm going to leave it exactly the way she had it. I'm moving in and I'm going to protect it. It's the perfect tribute. I grabbed the pen and began signing the ownership transfer forms. Every single stroke of ink felt like a massive victory lap. There is just one final piece of business, Whitmore noted, sliding a completely different file across the desk. Regarding your vehicle. The car your sister stole from you. I had honestly been so overwhelmed by the house, I had almost forgotten about the car. Your father possessed zero legal authority to blindly transfer that title, Whitmore explained smoothly. The vehicle was officially registered in your name, and the purchase history proved it was bought entirely with your personal funds. His transfer was highly illegal and totally invalid. Wait, what exactly does that mean? I asked, confused. It means, he chuckled, we file a formal police complaint today, have the fraudulent registration instantly voided, and you legally take your car back. A massive, genuine grin spread across my face. Let's absolutely do that. As I signed the final sheet of paper, I looked up at the lawyer. Mr. Whitmore, did my grandmother ever explicitly say anything about my parents before she passed? He paused, carefully choosing his words. The last time we spoke, she looked at me and said, the family will never understand this choice. But Holly will. And, honestly, that is more than enough. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. She really, truly understood them. She knew exactly how evil they could be. She saw them for exactly who they were, Whitmore smiled softly. And that is exactly why she gave you the armor to fight them. I walked out of that law office, clutching the deed to my new home, feeling a profound sense of peace radiating in my chest. The brutal war was finally over. Now, I just had to focus on healing. Within a single week, the toxic fallout from the birthday party had infected my parents' entire lives. 200 gossiping relatives is a deadly weapon. The truth spread like absolute wildfire. Aunt Ruth became my primary informant, calling me every couple of days to give me the glorious updates. Your parents are bleeding friends, Ruth practically cheered over the phone one afternoon. The Hendersons permanently canceled their weekly country club dinner. The Watsons have blocked your mother's phone number. I honestly never asked for any of that, I sighed. You didn't have to. Ruth laughed. 200 prominent people watched them act like absolute psychopaths, Holly. They dug their own social graves. But the social ruin was nothing compared to the financial hits. My father's entire real estate empire was heavily dependent on his flawless reputation as an honest, trustworthy family man. Less than 2 weeks later, one of his absolute biggest investors, a massive developer named Martinez who had worked with my dad for 15 years, abruptly backed out of a massive $50,000 contract. Word on the street was that Martinez walked into my dad's office and said, "I heard exactly what you did to your daughter over a house you didn't even own." I refuse to do business with a man who treats his own blood like garbage. My mother didn't escape the karma either. She had sat proudly on the local charity board for 2 decades. They held a quiet vote and unceremoniously kicked her off the committee. The board chair personally told her, "We require our members to publicly align with our ethical values." Hearing all of this didn't make me feel victorious or smug. It just made me feel incredibly exhausted. They literally brought this entirely on themselves, Danny pointed out when I gave him the updates. You didn't post a single dramatic rant on Facebook. You didn't run a smear campaign. They're the ones who deliberately invited 200 witnesses to their own villain origin story. He was absolutely right. The raw truth always finds a way into the light. I didn't need to scream my innocence from the rooftops. My total silence was deafening enough. But while my parents were losing their country club friends, Megan was facing complete and utter ruin. A month after the party, Ruth came over to my apartment to drink tea on my balcony in the crisp autumn air. Megan finally had to list her house, Ruth said quietly, taking a sip of her Earl Grey. I carefully set my mug down. They're actually selling it? They literally couldn't afford a single mortgage payment, Ruth sighed. The massive crypto debt completely buried them. The bank was threatening foreclosure. So, she and Kyle packed up all their designer garbage and moved into your parents' basement. I searched my heart, expecting to find a rush of cruel vindication. But all I found was total emptiness. Of course, Patricia refuses to take any accountability. Ruth rolled her eyes, stirring her tea. She sits around telling anyone who will listen that the economy crashed, the housing market failed, but mostly, she blames you. She actually says, if only Holly wasn't so greedy and shared her massive inheritance, poor Megan would still have her home. Even if I sold the house, the cash wouldn't have even put a dent in Megan's ridiculous debts, I muttered. We know that. But Patricia will go to her grave refusing to admit her golden child is a massive failure. We sat in a peaceful, comfortable silence for a long time, watching a stray bird land on the balcony railing. Grandma Eleanor used to absolutely love watching the birds. Do you have any regrets? Ruth finally asked me. About any of this? I thought about it for a deep, long moment. I deeply regret that they were never capable of viewing me as a real human being. I regret that I spent 30 years thinking I was broken because I wasn't enough for them. I looked over at my aunt and smiled. But I absolutely do not regret fighting back. Never again. Ruth reached over and patted my hand. Eleanor is looking down right now, and she is so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. For my entire life, my toxic family had expertly manipulated me into carrying the heavy burden of their endless mistakes. They made me feel completely responsible for saving them. But not anymore. Exactly 2 weeks later, the day finally arrived. I was getting my car back. The legal channels had moved shockingly fast. Mr. Whitmore filed the police report, submitted the financial paper trail, and completely nullified the bogus title transfer. My father had committed blatant fraud. I drove over to my parents' massive, overly manicured estate, but this time, I wasn't alone. I had a fully uniformed police officer escorting me up the driveway. Honestly, I had been severely dreading this exact moment. I was bracing myself for screaming, crying, and another theatrical meltdown. But as we walked up the massive stone driveway, the giant house suddenly looked incredibly small to me. It looked hollow. Megan slowly opened the front door. Her face was completely devoid of makeup, her eyes were severely sunken, and she looked like she had aged 10 years in a single month. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a fit. She just silently lifted her arm and dropped my keys into my open palm. Thank you, I said firmly, and I genuinely meant it. For a microscopic second, I saw something shift in Megan's exhausted eyes. Was it shame? Was it an actual ounce of regret? I'll never know. Because a second later, her face hardened back into a scowl, and she turned around and retreated into the dark house, shutting the heavy door behind her. I never even caught a glimpse of my parents. Frankly, I didn't care to. As I turned to walk toward my beautiful car, a familiar voice echoed from the side of the yard. Holly. I looked over. Aunt Ruth was standing on the side patio, having obviously sneaked out the back door just to see me off. "Are you going to be okay, kiddo?" she called out. I looked up at the giant windows of the bedroom I grew up in. The yard where I used to play completely by myself while Megan hosted lavish pool parties. "I'm finally learning exactly how to be okay," I yelled back with a massive smile. Ruth beamed, wiping a tear from her eye. "And that is more than enough." I slid into the driver's seat of my car, and fired up the engine. The gentle rumble of the motor instantly settled my racing heart. Getting this car back was never truly about the monetary value of a vehicle. It was about aggressively reclaiming the dignity they had tried to strip from me. I threw it in reverse, pulled out of the driveway, and watched the Dixon family estate vanish in my rearview mirror for the final time. I never once looked back. 1 month later, I officially moved all my boxes into Grandma Eleanor's cozy house. The little property on the edge of the woods felt completely different now. It felt serene. It felt like home. I spent the first entire week deep-cleaning, reorganizing, and just letting her warm presence wrap around me like a giant hug. I purposefully kept her favorite reading chair parked right by the front window. I kept her vintage floral tea set proudly displayed in the kitchen cabinet, and I made sure to refill the wooden bird feeder on the porch every single morning, just like she did for 40 years. I did make a few fun changes. I painted the master bedroom a bright, happy yellow, and I hung up some beautiful new curtains in the living room. It was the perfect blend of her memory and my new future. Once every single box was unpacked, I sat down on my new couch and drafted one final text message to my parents. It took me 3 grueling hours to write. "I want you to know that I do not carry hate in my heart for any of you. But I absolutely refuse to continue participating in a dynamic where I am treated like dirt on your shoes. You publicly disowned me. You handed me a $400,000 invoice for my childhood. You cheered while my sister stole from me. These are extreme actions that I am not just going to sweep under the rug. If there ever comes a day where you are ready to have a genuine relationship that isn't built on financial leverage or toxic obligation, you know where to find me. Until that miracle day comes, I require total distance. Please respect my boundary." I hit the send button, took a deep breath, and powered down my phone. They never replied. And honestly, I was incredibly relieved. In the beautiful months that followed, I built a brand new life from the ground up. Danny started coming over every single Saturday night for homemade dinners. Aunt Ruth made it a tradition to visit every Sunday afternoon for tea on the porch. My amazing coworkers from the ICU became the close-knit social circle I had always been too terrified to embrace. I realized I wasn't alone at all. I had an incredible family. We just didn't share the same blood, and honestly, that made our bond infinitely more special. One cool autumn evening, I was standing on the wooden porch, watching the sunset bleed vibrant shades of orange and pink across the sky. "I think I'm finally figuring it all out, Grandma," I whispered into the cool breeze. "Just like you promised I would." Later that same night, I sat down in her favorite armchair with her final, secret letter resting gently in my hands. The paper was already getting incredibly soft from how many times I had nervously folded and unfolded it. The blue ink was slowly beginning to fade. But staring at those final words still hit me like a freight train, just like the very first day I read them. "Live like you deserve to, sweetheart." For 32 agonizing years, I had sat around desperately waiting for my toxic family to validate me. Waiting for them to value me, to see my worth, to love me with the same fierce loyalty I gave them. I had spent decades hacking off pieces of my own personality just to squeeze into the tiny box they built for me. I silenced my own voice just to maintain their fake peace. It literally took being publicly humiliated and financially extorted in front of 200 people for my brain to finally snap awake. I never needed their validation to matter in this world. Grandma Eleanor knew that absolute truth. She knew it from the very beginning. That is exactly why she legally left me the house. It wasn't about the $650,000 price tag. It wasn't about the physical land. She did it because she desperately wanted me to have physical, legally binding, undeniable proof that someone in my bloodline had truly seen me. I was never the selfish, ungrateful villain they tried to paint me as. I was never a burden or a disappointment. I was the daughter who relentlessly showed up. I was the one who stayed when things got dark. I was the one who loved unconditionally. And that was more than enough. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the neighborhood in a peaceful twilight. Somewhere deep in the oak trees, a mockingbird started singing a beautiful melody. "I miss you so much, Grandma," I whispered to the empty porch chair beside me. Every single day, the evening breeze picked up, gently rustling the dry autumn leaves in the yard. It sounded just like a soft whisper, like she was answering me back. I carefully folded the worn letter, brought it up to my chest, and pressed it directly against my heart. "Thank you," I breathed out into the night. "Thank you for actually seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. And thank you for finally giving me the permission to choose myself." Because at the end of the day, that is what Grandma Eleanor truly bequeathed to me. Not a piece of real estate. She gave me permission to live. And that is my story. It was an incredibly painful journey to finally talk about publicly, but I sincerely hope sharing it helps someone out there who feels trapped in a toxic family dynamic. Here is the absolute biggest lesson I learned. Setting hard boundaries is not an act of selfishness. Sometimes it is the only viable way to survive. If my story resonated with you tonight, please take a second to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone in your life who desperately needs to hear this message. Make sure you check out the description box below for more insane family stories just like this one. Thank you all so much for listening to me, and I will catch you in the next video. Stay strong.